Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Wednesday, February 26th, 2025. Time to get rolling on another show, and, well, we're doing it. What do you want from me? I said it was time to roll, and we're rolling. Yeah, you hear me, don't you? All right, I know. I'm a little short-tempered. Things going about as expected in this authoritarian regime that we're living in, and I just can't believe that this goes on, and I don't know what else we're going to do. We have to start another show, right? I mean, it's 9 o'clock. As I learned from watching, Saturday Night, the movie documenting, it wasn't a documentary, it was a dramatization of the launch of the first Saturday Night Live program way back in 1975? I don't know. I guess it is, because it's 2025 now, and we did a 50th anniversary thing. But, yeah, the statement that was Lorne Michaels' thing, which I guess became the mantra of the show at some point, or at least the people running the show in the background. The show doesn't go on at 11:30 because it's ready. The show goes on because it's 11:30 or something like that. Some words to that effect. And it's 9 o'clock and we got to go. All right. And you all have to get up and you got to have your day and go to work, and people need to eat breakfast and at least go on until they're physically forced to do something different, I guess. But what can I tell you? Mass layoffs continue. New rounds of mass layoffs coming off the shelves. I don't think there's anything new or unexpected about that. At the same time, decisions being made in federal courts saying, no, these things shouldn't be going forward. And we're setting up the test here about whether or not the administration, dodgy, whatever you want to call it, whoever you think might be in charge of it, that's another big story for the day, whatever they think these things might mean to them, or the court rulings or whatever. We already have a couple of examples of blatant disregard for federal court orders that are very explicit about either putting a stop to the firings or putting a stop to the impoundment of funds. It's just not happening. And I imagine, I guess in the best possible scenario, you might imagine that Trump and the administration are waiting for a definitive word from the Supreme Court before they decide what to do. The problem is, what if when we get there, they decide to simply ignore the Supreme Court? I don't know. We've all been anticipating this for a long time. Just saying that it's proceeding apace. Other things that happened overnight, the House purports to have passed a budget resolution. It doesn't finalize anything. The Senate, of course, has to pass their own budget resolution. They have to agree as between them on the actual language. It's not entirely clear how they plan to do this. The Senate has its own approach to the budget resolution that they preferred, but now they've been kind of jammed by the House. And there were some procedural shenanigans, and they shouldn't have happened. It doesn't work that way, but they just did it that way anyway. Long story short on that one, they held the vote, despite the fact that they hadn't locked down all Republican votes in favor of the budget resolution, so that would put them in jeopardy. And they, in fact, lost the vote. And they ran out of time. They held the vote open for a long time. They tried twisting some arms. It wasn't working. And then at some point in the early-ish evening, they pulled the vote and simply said, forget about it, never mind, and told everybody at that point, that's it, we're going to come back tomorrow, I guess, and try and fix this thing and try voting again. And they sent everybody home with word that there were no further votes expected that evening. This, by the way, after the 4 or so Democratic members who had been absent earlier in the day for other votes and might have made the difference in the outcome of the budget resolution vote, given that there were 3 or so Republican no votes on the budget, showed up from out of nowhere. Very astute, very adept work behind the scenes by the Democratic leadership to make sure that they got themselves there. We had members who have been ill, who made it all the way back to the floor to vote, members who were in the hospital who made it all the way back to the floor to cast their votes, members who had just had a baby. Well, one member who just had a baby who made it all the way back to the floor. Only one Democratic member didn't make it back. He is hospitalized during some cancer treatment. You might wonder why he remains in office. That's a separate question. It wasn't going to change the outcome of the vote or anything like that, but still, you see, everybody was really going all out to make sure that they did everything. And although it didn't, work per se and defeat the resolution and keep it off the floor, that was never going to happen anyway. They would just revise it and come back later. It was an important show of strength and important to show Republicans that they're going to have to produce every single vote every single time. And even people that you think are out of action because they're in the hospital are going to come to the floor and make you produce your votes. So I thought that was an important message for the day. Elsewhere, we found out kind of purportedly who is the dodgy administrator. This we discussed yesterday being an important point in dialogue with the federal judges considering the various cases moving through the federal courts on the firings and the impoundment. Judge Colleen Kotelly pressing the DOJ very hard yesterday on who the hell is this administrator that you say is complying with the executive order that provides the authority for any of this stuff. The lawyers couldn't say yesterday. I'm not certain which it was, whether you'll be fired if you say who it is, or I think they just legitimately did not inform the attorneys that were appearing in court who the administrator was. And I don't think it was because they were trying to make them, look bad, or that they thought they were unauthorized to find this out, or they wanted to withhold the information for any longer. It was actually that they didn't know. They hadn't settled on who was going to be administering this thing, if not Elon Musk. And they didn't want it to be Elon Musk because Elon Musk, once you admit it's him, he's just, every decision that's being made is revealed as the massive conflict of interest that we've always thought it was. All of these contracts being canceled, contracts for his competitors being canceled, contracts for his competitors being canceled and transferred over to companies that he owns. All sorts of things like this would create whole new raft of roadblocks to Dodgy's work, so they needed to pretend someone else was doing it, and it took them until the afternoon. They had a press conference at the White House. They were asked directly who it is, and the White House press secretary declined to answer the question and said, we'll tell you later. And later in the afternoon, they came up with somebody, a civil servant who has been working at the U.S. Digital Service on and off for many years, all the way back to the Obama administration, by the way, so across multiple administrations. And they announced out of nowhere, that's the administrator. Now, the administrator, by the way, as it turns out, is on vacation in Mexico at the moment and was, I think, a little surprised to find out that she was the administrator. So anyway, we'll touch on all of that, and we'll let Greg Dworkin do it as well, because he's here. I'm sure he's relaxed, enjoying the show, but let's make him work for a living in exchange for $0. Good morning, Greg. How are you? Here's your $0 bill.
I'm fine. I really am enjoying the show. It's fun. I love the pronunciation of DOGE is dodgy. I mean, that's exactly what it is. Sense. It's the dodgy department.
Yes, I had that suggestion to me some time ago. I think it works. I forget sometimes that I'm supposed to do it, but yeah.
Here's how it does work, because they're in court.
Yes.
And again, I'm telling you this from a layperson point of view, so I got everything wrong, but this is how it struck me. So
doesn't really matter. Let's do it.
They're talking to the judge, and the judge says, I want information that's crucial to my decision. Such as who's the administrator?
You won't get it.
Okay. And they say, well, I don't know.
Right.
Well, why did you do this? Well, I'm not sure. Well, you can't do this. I told you had to release the funds. You had to move these people back. Well, I don't know if we did or we didn't. I mean, the whole approach. And then later, the spokesperson says, we're completely transparent. We're not going to tell you who the administrator is. We'll tell you later because we're completely transparent. So the whole thing is delay. In this case, it's, I don't know, I'm not sure. Judge, you use the word the. What does the really mean? I mean, it's all this garbage.
Oh, yes.
And I don't know how the courts deal with that.
It's a very close call. I was thinking, I was just saying, I like to remind them, you have those little,
and you're in contempt.
You got those little wooden hammers for a reason. I know everybody thinks it's banging on the desk to get everyone's attention. You're supposed to hit the lawyers with them.
Right, exactly.
I mean, it's like the mace.
Yeah.
You should just give them a whack. Put your hand on my desk right here,
and
every time you say that, whack one of your fingers. Anyway. Yeah, it was not good, and it was a huge embarrassment. I'm sure the lawyers were upset at having to do it this way, but they did it. They could resign.
There's no point in being embarrassed when you're incapable of embarrassment.
Yeah,
I mean, that's one of the things that Trump.
It's hard to tell whether they really felt anything or not, but
they're lawyers. They're paid not to be embarrassed.
I guess so. It was
you
just
embarrassed
really
me. Triple my fee.
Yeah, well, but they're government lawyers. They get the same pay. It was very embarrassing for normal people to watch the press secretary say, "I'm not gonna reveal this information from this podium," which
because
by the way, was a lectern.
That's why I'm not revealing.
It was really super insane. And then they said, so okay, they came up with a name, and it was somebody, and I know it, and it's in here somewhere. But that's the point. It's not anybody you know.
Yeah, it's not anybody you care about. It's not anybody who knew that they were the administrator.
Right. And honestly, it was really interesting, too, that they picked somebody who was on vacation in Mexico. I don't know whether they did it because
for technical reasons, here is a
object.
human name.
Yeah.
Okay? Get off my case.
Right. Basically it. And I mean, like the idea that
it's a legal case. No, I'm not off your case.
All of us here in Dodgy are working around the clock. We're living on it. We're sleeping on couches.
Resigned because they couldn't do this because it's completely immoral.
Yeah, but the true believers, the ones that just brought in, they're all sleeping on the couches. But the administrator is on vacation in Mexico. I don't think that's the real administrator. But they had to give a name, so they gave that one.
Right. Anyway, so there's that. But I'm not even going to start with that. I'm going to start with your state and my favorite state outside of Connecticut and Maine and California is Virginia.
Oh, well, okay. That could be mine then.
Yeah, it could be yours.
Yeah.
So I love the headline.
What is it?
What it is it?
Yeah.
Dodgy's latest cut, Glenn Youngkin's balls.
Oh, my gosh.
This is
does he know this?
The Bulwark.
Well, I'll be darned.
And the Virginia governor's not the only one sacrificing self-respect.
Oh, my gosh. You should have covered up with the vest.
Dodgy's haphazard blitzkrieg of federal firings is falling harder on some places than others.
All right.
You know how Northern Virginia cares about traffic?
Yes.
They also care about federal jobs.
Yeah. Those are the people in traffic.
Like, people work there.
Right. And that's, by the way, just in case I want to insert this here, they care so much about traffic that one of the things that Donald Trump hates the most about the federal workforce, that so many of them telecommute or telework, that was a traffic issue. People were like, I can work an extra 2 hours a day if you let me not commute. That wasn't COVID. That wasn't
I'm
convenience.
Lazy. I want to do it from bed with coffee and my hair up in curlers.
That's how seriously they take traffic. They changed the law applying to the federal workforce to say if you guys can telework 3 days a week and rotate it, traffic will be more manageable.
Well, before Dodgy decided that they were real, Virginia had 144,000 federal employees.
We're not real. Right? Yeah. That's a lot. We live very close to Washington. I look at it and say,
that's 144,000 voters.
Right. And that's hence the purple then blue trend.
But fear not, writes Andrew Egger, Dodgy'd oft workers of the Commonwealth. Glenn Youngkin has a message for you.
Oh, hi, Glenn.
Your days of leeching off the public may have come to an end, but with a little elbow grease and pluck, you just might successfully transition to actual productive work in the private sector.
Oh.
That was the gist of Youngkin's strikingly tone-deaf press conference yesterday, focused on the cheerful theme, Virginia has jobs. Listen, Youngkin said, we have a federal government that's inefficient. We have an administration that's taking on the challenge of rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse, driving efficiency in our federal government. By the way, Time magazine looked at 40% of the contracts that Elon had canceled, and there's zero savings from them.
Oh.
But that doesn't mean Youngkin suggested you can't root out the wasters, fraudsters, and abusers with a little empathy. We have a lot of federal workers in the Commonwealth, he went on, and I want to make sure they know we care about them and we value them and we want them to find that next chapter. So basically what he did is he put up a website that if you click on it, takes you over to LinkedIn so you can go find a job. It's the stupidest thing. And somehow or other, first of all, and this is relevant to the charades that we had, the charade of the resolution on the budget that the House did yesterday, and has a lot to do with Glenn Youngkin and his vest. And the fact of the matter is, and I cannot stress this enough, there's no such thing as a Republican moderate. They just don't exist. They aren't there. Every single time you think you found one, they vote with their party on some abhorrent thing that they regret later or are troubled by. It doesn't make any, or in Youngkin's case, strikingly tone-deaf cheerfulness about. They're not moderates. They're not even close to moderates. And so, as long as you have that mindset, you will never be surprised that, hey, the Republican House was able to pass things. Even the moderates went on. There aren't any.
That's true. And it wasn't the moderates that were holding things up either. Because they don't exist.
Why wasn't it the moderates that were holding things up? And the answer is because there aren't any moderates.
Yeah, that's it. It was ultra MAGA, ultra radical weirdos that were holding it up, and anarchists, or somebody gave me a better terminology. Well, a longer terminology anyway. But anarchist is a pretty good description of the people who are holding things up. And then they were convinced not to hold it up anymore.
But you know what?
No.
FAFO, Leopard Face Eating Party, whatever you want to call it.
All right.
Sam Shirazi points out lots of undecided in this new Roanoke College poll of Virginia, but Trump is at 59% disapproval and 37% approval in this purple state. Many voters not tuned into the governor's race yet, but these are pretty rough numbers for GOP to run with an incumbent president. Abigail Spanberger at 39, Winsome Sears at 24.
Yes. Okay. And remember, Glenn Youngkin, term limited at 1.
Yes. So he can't run again.
Just is.
Thank God.
Well, the law says he can't. I don't know whether that's going to... He's not the type
to... Well, no, I'll comply with the law. I simply won't leave.
Right. Well, that's true. I didn't run again.
I never planned to.
No, I'm never going to run. I'm not even going to walk at the end.
I'll just stay.
Yeah, he's not that kind of guy, but Trump would be.
No, Trump would be.
Anyway, right, true. So we face that. We have our off-year elections.
Right, coming up. But, point is Republicans aren't doing so well. I mean, this is not playing, and the headline I wrote for the Pundit Roundup is Virginia may be the resentment canary in the coal mine, and I think it's true. I think they are. I think it is.
Okay.
I mean, this goes with all those town meetings you've been talking about.
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, you won't be seeing those no more.
Yeah, because they're not
Paulie, they're gone. That's the word from, I don't know, was it NBC News? I'm sure everybody's got the story by now. Republicans have gathered back in Washington, considered what happened to them over the last week, and said, well, the answer is don't do any more town halls. Then you won't have to hear the booing.
Before.
Yeah.
They've lost because of it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
that's
fine.
True.
Now, James Carville...
And you don't need them for the town hall
people
either.
Angry because he stepped back and said, look, what Democrats need to do is nothing. Because Republicans are doing self-immolation. And I partially agree with him. That is to say, Democrats need to do three things. That, because they are self-immolating, led by Elon Musk. They're creating Democratic voters.
But if there's anything else, then that's not nothing. But
secondly,
a little bit of nothing, and then what else?
The courts, who are grinding along and finding that what they're doing really isn't within the law.
Yes.
And then thirdly, have some selected people who are good at it. Jamie Raskin, Chris Murphy, Jasmine Crockett, AOC, Bernie.
Maxwell Frost.
Who can actually get a message across. Get out there and make the case for Democrats. And all three of those things are happening. So I reject the idea Democrats are doing nothing.
Yes.
They're doing all three of those things.
Right. I know that kind of obviates the whole, well, do nothing. Well, nothing
Do
plus.
nothing is a third of our strategy.
That's all right. I understand it. And look, we don't need to hear from Carville anymore. That's fine. He wants to talk. I think we react. Everybody who I saw react to that reacted properly. You get, oh, Carville, and then go on with your life.
Yeah, but at the same time, again, Maine,
Yeah.
Virginia, Carville
Yeah.
from Louisiana.
Right.
These are center-right Democrats
Okay.
and represent a slice of the party. And so I think, for that slice of the party, fine. Carville's not my guy. I think he's his born again date is way past due.
Born again. Oh, okay. Yeah.
That's what you have on your beer, right? What's the born again date?
Born on date. They tried to float that. I don't know, but that's is now 30 years ago. They tried.
Yeah. Before the religious right took over.
Yeah.
But,
born again date is a totally
born
different
again
thing.
date for James Carville is whatever. They resurrect him every once in a while to bring him out. And,
right.
Then they put him back in the closet. But
people had a good time pointing out
he still
how
has
long
some
it's
good
been
points
for
to
him.
make for a certain select portion of the population.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of it's just, to me, it's interesting that the moderate center-left commentators on social media, Twitter, Blue Sky, wherever you find them, basically are saying, I don't think that Democratic officials really appreciate the white-hot anger that is seething through the base.
Right.
They're not picking up on it. Well, Murphy is, Crockett is, AOC is. I mean, certain people are. I'll tell you what
they're doing it.
White-hot angry about, those stupid text fundraisers we get every 15 frickin'
Well,
minutes.
that seems true. You can unite the party behind being angry at getting fundraising mails, but I don't know what to do with it. But yes.
So you block them and they find some other number to call you from.
Yeah.
And
maybe
you
it's
get charged
Republicans
for every time they do it too.
Sending you things. That would be a great dirty trick, right? Republicans send you Democratic emails when you opt out. Give me a list of everybody who opted out, and I'll pretend to be.
Email, right?
Yeah. Well.
So this is Harry
I don't think they
Enton
need
on
to do
February
it.
24th, so it's 2 days old, but I thought it was still interesting.
the Born on
To quote Scooby-Doo, on how Americans view the economy. 20% view it as excellent or good, worse than at any point during Trump's first term. Yikes, 59% say the economy is getting worse, which it is. Try to buy some eggs. Worse than at any pre-COVID point during Trump's first term. Danger territory, says Harry Enton. April 2017, 40% said the economy is currently excellent or good. Trump was president at the time.
Sort of.
February 2025, 20% say that. 20%. That's an incredibly low number.
Yes. And it's the same number when you ask questions like, is it okay if Donald Trump declares himself dictator? 20% say yes. How's the economy? Great. Can pigs fly? Yes.
Well,
are you the Doge administrator? Yes.
This is a tweet from G. Elliott Morris, which I think, since we're just mentioning polling and Trump's not so great numbers, we should do this too. Americans voted for Trump, G. Elliott Morris writes, the 538 guy, but don't support his agenda. Our look at 300 polls asking support for Trump's policy. Trump's agenda is mostly underwater with Americans. The only thing they really like is beating up on LGBTQ people.
Osama bin Laden also mostly underwater, just to draw a parallel.
So on immigration, Trump is only +2. On healthcare, he's -27. Crime -24. Foreign policy -15. Doge -9. Executive power.
He's doing great with crime.
-9. Yeah. Trade -7.
There's a lot of minuses.
Really, I mean, so
immigration is
there's
the only
a couple
plus,
of messages
and
there.
it's
One of
2.
the things is LGBTQ need to readjust. Face reality. There's nothing wrong with LGBTQ stuff, but better messaging, better phrasing. Realize that you're somewhat unpopular and work to make yourself more popular. There's ways to do it.
Well, I mean, community's made tremendous strides in the last decades. They're actually quite adept at it. And, I mean, they're working against they're
working against the
tide.
tide. They always have. I mean,
an
it's
intentional
probably more
tide
underwater
that's
10, 15 years ago, without question.
Right. Yes, I don't lay
I'm
any
just saying,
blame
this
here.
is the current state of the art. And so don't assume that this is a battle already won. It isn't.
Well, that's true, and I don't think there's anybody left in their community that says, "Oh yeah, we're doing great, everything's fine, don't need to push back." I think all alarms
I'm talking
are
about
blaring.
The donors, the rest of the Democratic base who takes things for granted but shouldn't.
Okay. Yes.
You know, there's other data coming out from the last election that Harris did as well or better with white folks than Biden ever did, than Clinton ever did, Hillary.
Okay.
And lost because of black and Hispanic voting.
Is that what?
And therefore work on that. I mean, you know, just there's stuff to do. There's work to do. It's pretty clear as to what it is. But social media, influencers, that sort of thing, modern American life, heavily Latino rightist content, very little to counter it.
Yeah, that was. I mean, I'm assuming that took a lot of people by surprise. Even though, again, that alarm got sounded, everybody was like, "Well, that's going to be
Joe
a
Rogan,
fringe
except
number."
in Spanish. And what are you doing about it?
Yeah, and that's all it takes. And I assume that when you said, "All right, well, having done better with white folks, but losing because of," well, and not because of, but I mean, you point to, all right, where was the leakage? All right, some votes that you thought
she gets
were
a 2020 vote in that category. She wins.
Yeah, there are some votes that you thought were locked down and that might be rebelling because they didn't get enough attention or just because they were fooled by weirdos. I mean,
it's the same social media,
takes a
only
couple
in
moments.
Spanish.
Yeah.
It's the same, ecosystem with Fox, except in Spanish.
Yeah, and why wouldn't that work? They're the same.
Hi, everybody. This is Scott Anderson, your summary guy. Were you looking forward to an egalitarian democracy free of bigotry, misogyny, racism, and greed, where people of different appearances, belief, and heritage had a right to live without fear, and everyone could expect a basic level of health, stability, and safety throughout their life? Well, too bad. The plain fact is that we're heading in the wrong direction. And where we once had a voice in such things, increasingly we don't. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. However, if you're looking to join people who understand today's issues and can intelligently address the reality of today from your point of view, you can join us at Kagro in the morning. As you know, there aren't many of us out there, at least compared to them. We need to stick together, and by that I mean send us money. That is contributions to patreon.com, secure, reoccurring contributions. Those contributions keep this show in the air and us together. We've been through a lot together. The temporary loss of the presidency, we hope. The temporary loss of the House, the Senate, the Supreme Court, we hope. Face it, we are pretty much all that we have left. Remember, we couldn't do it without you, and you shouldn't do it without us. We're in this together, so thanks.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I think we cleared everything up in the first segment. So what else could there be?
So you can go home. Oh, wait, you are?
I'm working. I'm teleworking, Greg.
Oh, okay.
I'm telling you I'm working. It's a true.
It's
a spicy meatball, yes.
So this is
next?
from our friends who used to do DKE, Daily Coast Elections. They're
Deeks.
now separate, and they're called the Down Ballot.
Yeah.
Ohio governor. A new poll of Ohio's race for governor taken just before businessman Vivek Ramaswamy finally made his campaign official shows Democrat Amy Acton.
Amy Acton. Doctor.
Who you want to call Amy Action, but we'll get to that.
Yeah.
Edging out the newcomer by 45-44. The same survey conducted by the Democratic firm Public Policy Polling shows
PPP.
Former Representative Tim Ryan trailing Ramaswamy 48-42.
Oh. Well, they're just looking for new names out there. Dr. Action.
The poll was paid for by 314 Action.
Oh, well, no wonder. Not
Yes.
Acton. Action.
Right. Amy Action leads by this poll paid for by 314 Acton, a progressive group that supports Democratic candidates with STEM backgrounds.
Oh.
science technology. The organization has not yet endorsed Acton, who previously ran Ohio's health department, but has spoke warmly of her when she launched her campaign, saying on social media it was excited to see her join the race. Ryan is not currently running, but recently declined to rule out the idea.
I see. Okay, I was wondering.
Now, Ryan's failed in a number of elections there, so maybe people think of him as old and tired.
Could be.
But at the same time, he hasn't announced he's running. So that may influence it as well.
That seems unfair to be polling and tell, he's losing. I mean, all right, we're drawing perhaps the wrong conclusion. Yeah.
Do you know who would win the presidency unanimously?
Yes.
Michelle Obama.
Oh.
All the polls say so, except she's not running.
Right. Well, that's one of the problems.
Now, if she were running, would the polls stay the same?
It's certainly more realistic that Tim Ryan might run than she would, but
sure. But I'm just saying, you know, sometimes you're not running and you do great. Yeah. You know who was a lock for the presidency before she actually made it official? Hillary Clinton. Polls said so.
Yeah.
You know,
right.
But Ryan,
actually being a candidate doesn't always help.
So just because you're not running doesn't mean you're losing. But Ryan is not running and he's losing. So I don't know that he's going to be the candidate.
This is a poll meant to convince him not to, presumably.
Maybe.
All right. I'm happy about
It's by
Dr.
a progressive
Action.
group, so it entirely could be the case.
Yeah. Does everybody remember? I mean, I guess newer listeners won't remember, but during the pandemic, and does everybody remember that there was one? During the COVID pandemic, Dr.
You don't, just wait till bird flu gets here.
You'll be reminded quickly enough. Dr. Acton was sort of the outspoken voice of reason in, I don't know, I guess the same dynamic was happening at the federal government with Trump, you know, downplaying everything, and Dr. Fauci and others saying, no, actually, it's pretty serious. And in Ohio, where the Republican governor, Dworkin, you know, like Trump, not to the same extreme, but certainly like Trump, downplaying things and on the Republican bandwagon, let's not do anything, let's let people drop their masks, let's open up the businesses. And Dr. Acton, who I kept mistaking for Dr. Action because it was such an awesome name, was, you know, the voice of science in it all.
Yeah.
And I guess that's why the STEM group is really happy. Yeah, okay. Right. So, I don't know. I'm just happy to be able to talk about Dr. Action again, and I think that she should adopt that name and just go with it.
Since we're talking about governors, we talked about Glenn Youngkin and his balls. We talked about...
We did. That's unfortunate.
We talked about who might run for Ohio governor. I guess DeWine isn't running. Now, Pennsylvania governor, down ballot covers that and says, surely Josh Shapiro can only be so lucky. Republican Doug Mastriano, who beat out some very stiff competition to win the title of worst candidate of 2022, now says he's considering another bid.
Okay.
Shapiro won 56-42 the first time, and Mastriano was the worst in a year that saw Carrie Lake, Herschel Walker, and Blake Masters all on the ballot. That's pretty good.
Wow. All right.
Could Mastriano screw over his party once again?
Yeah.
You're darn tootin'. He
It's they're asking him to, so you know, very likely yes. And Josh Shapiro had a big victory in court against the Trump administration of late too. It's just one of 10,000 that hasn't made our air yet. But some blocked funding, impounded funding, billions, multiple billions, supposedly freed up, and then we'll see whether it gets delivered. That's always the big question. Okay. What? I don't know. What else you got?
Nothing much.
How about the new IAI promotional video for Gaza, Trump Gaza?
I haven't seen that one.
Oh, my
goodness. I did see the Kristi Noem commercial that's been playing where Trump told Kristi Noem to pay for DHS Thank You Trump commercial, so they're starting to air.
Oh, that's
a quick turnaround. And according to her, if you're illegal, get out now, and if you're illegal but want to stay, fine, leave, and then you can come back. We'll make you a citizen maybe if we feel like it. And if you don't get out now, I'm going to shoot you like I do my dog.
Yeah.
And it was just incredibly unimpressive.
Oh. Well, I didn't think it was really likely to impress any of us, but that is some quick turnaround. But it doesn't matter what the content is. I guess you can make it right away. Or you can do it by AI as they did with the Trump thing. You'll see it before the end of the day.
Right. And actually, in my relatively brief 20-minute segment,
you know how it goes.
You know how it goes. This is from the contrarian Steve Vladeck. I thought it was of note because you've probably talked about it. I haven't talked about it enough. We haven't talked about it enough.
Then we will do it again.
Let's fire all the lawyers. The ominous removal of the judge advocates general by the Trump administration by Steve Vladeck in the Contrarian.
Hello, Steve. Thank you for calling. Yeah, in the Contrarian. Now, is that that's not
That's
his
a new
Substack?
one with Jen Rubin starting.
Okay. Do some more things.
Norm Ornstein.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, good company.
A couple of people, we'll see if it makes it. Anyway, buried in the headlines surrounding Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth's firing of Joint Chiefs Chairman CQ Brown and Chief of Naval Operations Admiral Lisa Franchetti was a development that's far more ominous. Hegseth's sacking of Army Lieutenant General Joseph Berger III, Air Force Lieutenant General Charles Plummer, Navy Rear Admiral Leah Reynolds. These three officers were until Friday the Judge
Ohio
Advocate
State
General
of
their respective service branches. Now, people like Lindsey Graham, are flaunting the title of former JAG.
Yes.
Right? But these official title is TJAG, the Judge Advocate General of their respective service branches.
Ohio State University.
Exactly. Not just, it seems an ominous message, not just to the thousands of men and women serving in the JAG Corps or the millions of men and women in uniform, but to the entire country. Hegseth seemed to only reinforce that message on Fox News on Sunday, suggesting TJAGs were removed so they wouldn't be roadblocks to anything that happens.
Yeah, but that's what they do.
Despite George Clemenceau's famous quip that military justice is to justice as military music is to music, the reality is that military lawyers in the United States have long played a central role in standing up for the rule of law, and they're essentially supposed to be independent. That's the thing about it.
Judges.
So just like the Sovereign District of New York, et cetera, part and parcel of what's going on here. In Henry VI, Part 2, Dick the Butcher's character famously says, Dick the Butcher, I
don't care what you do to the Butcher.
I think he lives on the West Side. Yeah. The first thing we do, let's kill all the lawyers. Shakespeare's clear implication was that killing the lawyers was a necessary precursor to the subverting of the rule of law. In the military, might be enough to fire all the lawyers and let the killing come second.
The military does do a lot of killing.
Yeah, so one has to keep an eye on that.
Yeah.
Big deal. Anyway, the medical research cuts are still hurting. Labs can't fund what's going on. This is a kind of a funny article. A Trump administration plan to change how the National Institutes of Health pays for medical research and other institutions has sent shockwaves through labs around the country. Nothing funny about that. But I want to tell you about Dr. Donald Milton at the University of Maryland.
All right.
He studies how respiratory viruses spread.
That's not important.
He faces a threat to its funding and staffing if the new policy goes through. And whether you're talking about COVID or bird flu, like BFD. The centerpiece of his lab is a contraption inside a booth with plastic windows. And I'm going to send you the image.
All right.
I'll send you the link later, but I want to send you the image.
All right.
And what you can see is a guy in a plastic booth with a big funnel over his face.
Yes.
Okay. And this is called the Gesundheit II. A research tool that collects and measures particles in people's exhalations or sneezes.
The Gesundheit II.
Yeah, look.
Gesundheit I exploded.
In terms of flu spread, there's some very famous videos you can find on YouTube about somebody sneezing and what it actually looks like.
Oh, yeah, right.
And how far those particles
Clouds
go.
of snot.
Yeah, but the Gesundheit II, well, they're airborne particles. And so you could see them spread 20 feet away from where the person sneezes. They're really dramatic.
Yeah.
But the Gesundheit II is designed to capture all of that.
Well, good, because it's gross.
We have people who come into a flu or other respiratory infections. They sit with their face in the cone, and all the air around them is drawn into the cone. And it's one way that Milton and his colleagues study how respiratory viruses like flu and COVID spread from one person to another. And his lab is going to get shut down because there just isn't enough funding in the way that the Trump administration wants to fund medical research.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, that COVID and flu research are important.
They are.
Let alone TB.
Although I kind of do feel like,
other respiratory viruses that are easily transmittable.
Yeah.
I mean, it's important to do research on stuff like this.
It is, and it'll have. I mean, I don't think it answers the question, which is already asked and answered. Like, okay, does sneezing on people, if you have a respiratory illness and you sneeze on somebody else and they breathe in, are they going to get it? Yeah. But
Probably.
You want to know the numbers and like how far away might you have to stand and how many people in a room are going to get it if one guy has it, so that you can figure out how to, give people precaution. Some diseases will say, as long as you don't stick around more than 20 minutes, you're fine. And other diseases are going to be, nope, you cannot be in the same room. Don't you want to know which one is circulating now? Yeah, you would. But anyway, yeah, this is some contraption. It looks a little bit like, I don't know what to say. I guess it's like when the dogs have the cones on their heads, but it's backwards. It looks like a plague doctor mask, maybe, or Spy versus Spy.
Yeah,
but with a machine
Spy
attached.
Spy, that's a good one.
Wow.
Anyway,
I wouldn't want to sit in that.
You can't do this on the air, but I'm sending you some great sneeze videos from YouTube.
I can
one
sneeze.
One set to
air.
opera, the other one showing the actual particles.
Ugh. Yeah. Okay.
It's right. But somebody's got to do this.
Right.
And look, somebody has to, take apart and study the dynamics of snot. We had a guy in the lab that I used to work in that specialized in that, and good for him. That wasn't for me, but somebody's got to do it.
All right. PhD in snotting.
Yeah, Dr. Snot.
I guess so. Right, well, they got Dr. Pimple Popper, Dr. Action. All the doctors have something. So, but these clouds, this is the reason I tell you, cover up when you sneeze or sneeze into your elbow. Why? So you don't sneeze into your hands and then wipe it on somebody. Sure. Right. I don't know. I don't know who needs to, that's the phrase. I don't know who needs to hear this. I don't know who needs convincing.
Well, I don't know
Stuff
who
comes
needs
out
to
of
hear
you
it,
when
but
you
I'm
sneeze.
telling you, you just heard it.
Right. Well, now I know who doesn't need to hear it.
Can't unhear it.
Me.
Can't unsee it.
Yeah, you got to see. There are still people in the world. You got to see this because I don't see anything when he sneezed. Yeah, well, look at this. But what do you think is coming out?
Right
you
in
know
front
what
of him
happens.
and you'll feel it. Okay, how about that?
Yeah, I mean that's one answer. I don't know why people don't think that's the case.
I don't know why people don't think. I agree with you.
Yeah, I mean, and that was a big part of the masking thing. Well, masks don't block 100% of it. But I'll tell you what, if I sneeze in your face, wouldn't you rather I'm wearing a mask
or you
and you?
Somebody
should be doing something. But I mean, if both of us do, you're less wet after I sneeze, right? Right. Science. Boom. You just scienced, buddy. Now wear your mask.
Wear your mask.
No, freedom. All right.
Freedom. Freedom for me, because I'm done. Right.
Just get in the box, man. Not you, the guy who wants the freedom.
Crawling in here with the Gesundheit II.
That's really something. I like the name for it, Gesundheit II.
Yeah.
But
what I really am concerned about now is what did the Gesundheit I look like?
Right. What happened to it? It blew up.
It was made out of paper mache and it tended to leak. We didn't have enough lab equipment, so we made it out of a colander and a cheese grater, and for some reason it wasn't collecting everything, so we come up with the Gesundheit II. Now it's solid, and it seems to work better.
I guess. I'm sure over in Dodgy they're like, how many of these Gesundheits do you need?
Why
wasn't one
for a
enough?
MacArthur grant. I went from the colander to the solid tube. The solid funnel, and I just think that's genius. I think I should apply.
It seems self-evident, but only in hindsight.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's a good one. There's things going on.
I promised to
all
send
over
you the
place.
link, so I will.
Yes. All right. The link for the source of the picture of the Gesundheit II.
Yes,
right.
Which is really a story about NIH funding.
Okay. All right, well,
but,
that should be good.
You got to tell stories to make things interesting.
You do, and there are many, and then you can link the stories together. There is somewhere here in Pocket is the story of how they're faring in court and how NIH, essentially the courts ordered NIH funding to be turned back on, and they have a certain deadline by which the money has to be flowing, and the Trump administration appears to be saying, we're not going to do it. So now we find out, or at least what's the next stage. If the federal district court says you must do this and they don't do it, where does it go from there? That's
the
coming
marshal
next.
of the Supreme Court.
Yes, but he's got his head stuck in this Gesundheit II, and I don't know whether he can handle this until we get him out.
Tony Marshall, that guy.
Well, goodness, there's so much happening. All right, well, let's see. There's another day this week that's available to you to collect some more information.
What? There's other days of the week?
There is. We've added one tomorrow.
We added Thursday to the week just so that we could do the show.
Thor did not have a day. He wanted one. He had a hammer. I gave him the day.
Yeah.
So that's how it works.
And all right. I'll be back tomorrow with Gesundheit III.
All right. Cool. We'll see how many of these things it takes to get this right.
Yep. All right.
Gesundheit I, Gesundheit II, whatever it takes. Very good. Thanks, Greg.
Have some golden voice.
Yes, I finished it. In fact, today was the last one of the golden voice, but I still have a trove of gift tea to get through. Yeah, and who knows? It may turn out to be more valuable. Platinum, rare earth voice is coming.
For those of you who send David golden voice tea, send more. He's out.
I'm still working my way through the stockpile. Just one of 15 throat-soothing and fruit-infused teas I'm still working on.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. I got a
So what's the next
closet
one?
full
What's the next one you're going to choose here?
Well, let's see. I was rotating it with the peppermint tea. Uh-huh. The brand name being Pukka, and I don't know how you pronounce that, and it's probably not Pukka, but if it is, think about changing it. We got that.
Is that a kind of poltergeist?
I don't know. Maybe in some
I think it is.
Culture somewhere I don't know about. Could be. And maybe that's it. We're exercising the poltergeist from my voice. It's a poltergeist when it's in your voice box. Connecticut poltergeist. I don't know.
The pukka.
Pukka.
P-U-C-A.
Oh.
The pukka is a creature of Celtic English and Channel Islands folklore.
Really?
It's Old English for goblin.
Oh. Well, this is Pukka, but I don't know what that is. But, it could also be that's interesting. I never heard of that one. Pukka. Is it pronounced that way?
I don't know. I'm not Irish.
Right. All right. But I'm pleased to see that it has led us here. I like to learn these things along the way. All right.
Exactly.
All right. Well, I have things to tell you, and I don't know. You may have things to do, but you're welcome to listen in to the things I have to tell you.
Yeah,
and I'm looking for that
it's a podcast.
NIH
I can always listen
piece.
later, right?
Yes, that's true. That option is available to you. I'm going to scroll back a little ways because I think I saw Marcy Wheeler talking about the NIH funding in particular.
Well, anything Marcy talks about is worth looking at. So
yes.
Take care, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.
All right, will do. And I'll start scrolling and start looking. I thought I might have parked it, but it is one of 15, 20 cases moving at any given time that are aimed more or less at the same thing. Speaking of being aimed at more or less the same thing, 2 more near misses in aviation yesterday involving passenger aircraft. Apparently within 90 minutes, 2 near accidents, and one of them at National Airport here in D.C. again, which is, of course, where we just experienced the crash between the passenger jet and the helicopter that sort of kicked this whole crisis off. The New York Times, all right, I guess we'll go further afield. We'll just start ranging through the various things that we have for you. New York Times reported this one, so I have it close at hand. 2 planes in Washington and Chicago both abort landings to avoid collisions. I don't know, we need to get into the details of it so much, but it needs to be on the record. The near misses on Tuesday came after a string of aviation disasters, including the mid-air collision between an Army helicopter and passenger jet last month that killed 67 people and happened at the same airport, Washington's National Airport, sometimes referred to as Ronald Reagan National Airport. And, it's of some significance what happened here. Twice in 90 minutes, I saw the Chicago one first, and maybe because there was video available for it. And I don't know if there's probably video somewhere of the Washington incident, and I haven't seen it yet, but it's probably out there circulating. But the first one to break through video-wise, Southwest Airlines, was it Southwest Airlines? Landing at a very non-Southwestern airport, Chicago's Midway Airport, and it's fully in landing mode, the gear's down, and in fact it looks like they may even have touched it. I can't tell from the video whether it actually wheels touched ground or just before they did, and this thing is fully ready to land, and then just pull back on the stick and bug out and abort the landing and go hard up and back in. I don't know what happened to them afterwards. I imagine they circled around and they waved off all the other traffic and let these guys land, or whether they had to circle for 20 minutes just to calm their nerves. As they're landing, a business jet, I think from FlexJet, it doesn't really, I don't know if it's the fault of the company, but they got to live this one down, is taxiing to, I don't know, somewhere, another runway, getting ready to set to take off, and just crosses straight across the runway that the Southwest Airlines jet is using to land. Pilots have to pull up. Like, if you just keep going, I don't know whether they would have just missed or what, but no one wants to risk it. But I guess it's just as likely they just crash into this jet crossing their runway. And that happened. That just happened. And apparently the tower had just told the FlexJet guys, hey, stop where you are. There's a plane landing. Don't cross this runway. You'll collide. And they just didn't listen, hear, understand, certainly didn't do what they were asked. And I'm not really certain how you avoid that. Now, naturally, this will be turned into an opportunity for Elon Musk to say Starlink would have avoided this. No, the information was available, digested by the tower, sent to the plane, and the guys on the plane just said, meh. For whatever reason, we're not going to do it. I didn't hear you. I didn't understand you. I don't know. But I don't think any computer system is going to change that. Meanwhile, as it turns out, that happened at around 8:50 a.m. Central Time, which means it would have been about 9:50 a.m. or I guess exactly 9:50 a.m. Eastern Time, which makes it about 90 minutes after an 8:20 a.m. Eastern Time incident involving American Airlines, where a flight was arriving from Boston at National Airport, also in its final descent, and suddenly canceled its landing because as it was landing, it happened to notice, hey, there's an airliner-shaped thing on the runway that we're about to land on facing the other direction, like our direction. In other words, another plane ready to take off on the same runway that had just been, handed over to American Airlines, Flight 2246, if you want to look it up, getting ready to land there. Now, that seems like, I don't know whether a computer could have helped with that one, but that's certainly an issue to try to figure out over at the tower. Why, air traffic controllers, did you tell this plane to take off on this runway when you had another plane landing on that same runway? It's not cross traffic. It's just you're pointing two planes at each other, and you're probably going to want to think that one through. But yes, that also, I guess, leads me to something else. I'm going to have to parse through all of this and try and find out where did I park all of these various stories. There's so many of them coming in all at once. But just yesterday, maybe I'll scroll through Blue Sky to find it. But another article about what Dodgy is up to. And I guess in the middle of the various dramas with Dodgy, this one from CNN, Musk's Starlink gets FAA, Federal Aviation Administration, gets FAA contract, raising new conflict of interest concerns. Chris Isidore reporting this for CNN, and the heart of this article leads you to, two other directions that are key to understanding what's going on with the government at large, dodgy in particular. So, conflict of interest concerns. I think it's possibly conflict of interest concerns that led the DOJ lawyers to have to pretend that they didn't know who the dodgy administrator was, because if they confess that it's Elon Musk, that causes trouble. What kind of trouble? These sorts of conflict of interest concerns. Now, there's a whole narrative story here, and of course, with the break coming up, we won't have time to get all the way through it, but long story short, to get it in before the break, Musk's Starlink gets an FAA contract. Now, this is a contract that may or may not solve any of the FAA's problems, but apparently has to do with information technology that's used by the FAA to control air traffic, among other things. But not always the landing stuff, takeoff and landing stuff, but navigation stuff, weather information, et cetera, et cetera. But apparently this was a contract that had been awarded at some point to Verizon, and somehow comes out the other side of the contracting process having been awarded to Starlink, which is, of course, run by SpaceX, which is, of course, run by Elon Musk, who is, of course, running dodgy, even though they say that he isn't. And the question I had, and that is not really cleared up in any way in this piece, but is just posed in this piece, between the lines, is how did that happen? And are the people in dodgy using their access to the electronic books, the balance books, the balance sheets in the government and the payment system, are they using their access to simply rewrite contracts in their name? How is it that Verizon had this contract, but then, alakazam, Starlink has this contract instead? It reminds me a little bit of the way we found out about the contracts for supposedly armored Teslas for the State Department being worth $400 million. But if you look at it, no, that's not the number. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I know it's a tangled web of different stories that I want to bring you. Let me see if I can run through this CNN piece here and maybe help straighten things out. So Musk's Starlink gets FAA contract, raising new conflict of interest concerns. Chris Isidore, CNN, goes like this. The FAA has agreed to use SpaceX's Starlink internet system. And remember, Starlink is also at the heart of the controversy that, I guess, ended in Elon Musk's decision unilaterally and without any authorization to disassemble and eliminate USAID. Why? You may recall USAID was investigating because USAID decided to do some contracting. We want to get some reliable, non-ground-based internet service to Ukraine because they need it in order to fight their war and run their government while being invaded by Russia, and of course operate some of their weapon systems, including drones, requiring reliable internet. Starlink seemed to be the answer because it was so difficult for the Russians to blow up the infrastructure of Starlink versus the infrastructure of, ground-based, fiber optic-based internet service could be easily disrupted. So because it was a democracy-building initiative, were able to spend some USAID money to buy Starlink terminals for Ukraine. They bought them. Elon Musk was supposed to deliver them, didn't deliver them all. Some of them mysteriously ended up in Russian hands instead. And then, of course, when the Ukrainians actually needed to use the things to conduct a defense against a Russian attack, Elon Musk was shutting it off on them, but not shutting off the Russians' use of Starlink, which seems like a pretty major problem for conducting American foreign policy, and a violation of the contract that paid the millions and millions of dollars to Elon Musk to deliver these things. So they investigated what happened to our millions of dollars. Why did some of it get diverted to the people we were supposed to be spending this money against? And I guess Elon didn't like being questioned or investigated, so he shut down the agency that, while it paid him millions of dollars, he shut down the agency that had the temerity to ask, did we get our money's worth from you, or are you cheating us? And by the way, are you also aligning yourself with the enemy and subverting American foreign policy and national security policy? Well, those are uncomfortable questions, so let's eliminate that agency. Now, on top of that, also, SpaceX is getting paid to provide Starlink to the Federal Aviation Administration, right here in the good old US of A, to upgrade the information technology networks that the FAA uses to manage U.S. airspace. And this raises new concerns about conflicts of interest for CEO Elon Musk, CEO, of course, of SpaceX. Not dodgy. He's not that guy. In one of his other roles, that is, as SpaceX CEO, and the conflict of interest in his other role as recommending funding cuts at federal agencies, including the FAA. That, of course, supposed to be by virtue of his administering the dodgy service, but since he denies he's doing that in order to avoid the conflict of interest charges, I guess we're in limbo on those. The size of this contract was not immediately reported. SpaceX is a privately held space technology company greatly dependent on federal contracts, primarily from NASA. Its Starlink satellite internet provides service for government and private customers around the world, including USAID and now FAA. The contract comes while Musk is leading efforts to make deep cuts in federal spending, including staffing cuts at the FAA, and some critics are raising questions about conflict of interest over his role overseeing government agencies that are supposed to be regulating his businesses, like we just said, in a slightly different context. Musk, a key supporter of President Donald Trump during the last election, which is an interesting way of saying he paid for the vast majority of its operations in the closing months, is heading the Department of Government Efficiency, except they deny that he is heading the Department of Government Efficiency, making moves to cut federal staff in the name of eliminating waste and fraud. The FAA, in a post on Musk's social media platform X, disclosed Monday night that it is testing one Starlink terminal. It's not that many, but one Starlink terminal at its Atlantic City, New Jersey facility, and two in what it called, I don't know, how would you like to be termed this? Non-safety critical sites in Alaska. In other words, your safety is not critical to us in Alaska. No. I mean, that's not what they meant it to say, but that's the way it reads. Anyway, Alaska has long had issues with reliable weather information for the aviation community, it said in the post. The 2024 FAA reauthorization required, but who cares about laws, right? Required the FAA to fix telecommunications connections to fix those needs, which is a normal thing for it to say. People crash in small planes all the time everywhere, but in Alaska a lot more because a lot more small plane traffic, certainly per capita up there, because of the vast distances, lack of transportation infrastructure, etc. The FAA's use of Starlink was first reported by Bloomberg. That report said it would eventually include 4,000 Starlink terminals and be deployed over the next 12 to 18 months. There is no dispute that the FAA's various computer and communications systems are badly in need of an upgrade. A December report by the Government Accountability Office was entitled, quote, "Urgent FAA actions are needed to modernize aging systems," unquote. So then, okay, there's certainly need for something. Did it need to be Starlink? I don't know. The better question, was it meant to be Starlink, or has that changed of late? And it's not directly addressed here, and it's very confusing. You'll see what I mean here. Soon after the fatal crash of a military helicopter and a regional jet on final approach to Ronald Reagan, Washington National Airport, Transportation Secretary and reality TV star Sean Duffy announced that he had had discussions with Musk and that he was going to help the FAA, quote, "remake our airspace," unquote, and, quote, "do it quickly," unquote. The FAA already has a contract with Verizon to upgrade its information technology networks. That's the part that becomes confusing to me. In a post on X Monday, Musk said, quote, "The Verizon system is not working and so is putting air travelers at serious risk." Verizon defended the quality of its work that it's doing for the FAA. Boilerplate, but it says Verizon is bringing the nation's most reliable network to the FAA at a time when critical infrastructure and technology enhancements are needed most. Verizon spokesman Rich Young said in a statement to CNN, "We're at the beginning of a 15-year contract with the FAA that will help the agency modernize its technology. Protecting Americans who rely on safe, secure, and functioning air traffic control system is more important than ever, and our enhancements will help make that happen," he added. Now, the question is, are they happening at all? Or has Elon Musk used his access to federal computer systems to say, when I woke up this morning, it said Verizon was the one getting paid to modernize the IT infrastructure for the FAA. But by the time I went to bed, the same line said Starlink was going to do it. Oh, really? I mean, is that what it said? Were you authorized to change that? Did you change that? Are you just hinting at changing it? What's happening here? What's going on with Verizon's thing? And of course, then the conflict of interest, even if he doesn't actually do it, the conflict of interest of 1, being in charge of the public expenditures, 2, owning the platform of Twitter and using that platform to say that Verizon's not working. So hint, hint, another company should take it over. Verizon just started. It's a 15-year contract. They're in year 1, and there's no data that says it's not working. But obviously the implication is, well, if it's not working, then you must need someone else. And if you need someone else, it might as well be me. And why not make it me? And if you won't make it me, what if I break into the computers and make it me myself? Is that happening? I don't know. You don't know. You'll never know. Money will just start flowing to Starlink because that's what Starlink is. It's a place where money flows to. Does it provide a service in exchange? Maybe. I'm not sure. That's what USAID was asking because we said we wanted X number of thousands of Starlink terminals to go to Ukraine and 0 to go to Russia. And that's not what happened. And we have questions. And you turned off our ability to ask those questions, so it's not answered yet, and you'll never get an answer because Elon Musk's needs there for you not to get that answer, or else you would call on somebody to put a stop to it. There's still more in the CNN article. Significantly richer is the next section. Musk has numerous business interests that are overseen by federal agencies. Beyond the FAA and NASA, he's also regulated by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. And you know how important traffic is here in Northern Virginia. Also, the Securities and Exchange Commission, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, the National Labor Relations Board, and the other disassembled agency, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. He has often clashed with several of those agencies over the years, but his businesses, including SpaceX, Tesla, and others, have also benefited from numerous government programs and regulations over the years, which has made him the richest man on the planet. Without early support for Tesla, from low interest rate loans to tax credits for buyers of its electric vehicles and the sale of regulatory credits to other legacy automakers trying to comply with federal emissions rules. Very complex, but that was out there too. Tesla, the major source of his wealth, might not exist today. And apparently it's taking a nosedive in stock market value as well. And sales of Teslas down almost 50% in Europe. He's taken a hit. But that's where his money comes from. If not outright grants of money or contracts to buy equipment from him or services from him, then there's also these weirdo tax schemes, right? Everybody needs to reduce their emissions, and if they can't or won't or don't want to, I don't know why, reduce their emissions at the legacy automakers using gas-powered cars, you can buy credits from Tesla, which of course are zero emissions, at least, from the cars while they're running, zero emissions. I don't know how they do about manufacturing the cars. Anyway, it's interesting and a huge benefit to Tesla and therefore to him. In prepared remarks for a House committee hearing on the topic of mining in space. That's a new topic. University of Minnesota law professor Richard Painter, who served as chief White House ethics lawyer under President George W. Bush, I don't know if that's a glowing recommendation, and who now also serves as the vice chair of government watchdog Citizens for Responsibility, responsible is what it says here, but it's responsibility and ethics in Washington, CREW, right, argued that space mining could eventually make Musk significantly richer. All right. Space mining poses a, quote, serious risk of new conflicts of interest given NASA's likely role in the future of space mining and Musk's duties in the Trump administration. Whatever they may be, despite the fact that they deny them. SpaceX has a contract to launch a probe later this week. Is it still later this week? For a space exploration company called Astroforge that hopes to do a flyby of an asteroid as a test in the hopes of eventually mining for minerals in space. Musk should be required to, quote, publicly disclose his financial information like every other senior official in the White House, unquote, said Painter's prepared remarks, calling him a special government employee, as he's been designated, to avoid him having to make his financial interests public is a charade, according to Painter, a frequent critic of Trump. So yes, just another situation in which a conflict of interest arises, and another reason why they need to go through contortions. He's not a federal employee, he's a special government employee. Well, if he's a special government employee, he can't be the administrator of Dodgy, so that means we need to come up with another name. Well, we don't know what that name is, or we refuse to give it to you, or whatever the games that they were playing in court ended up being. But finally, they ended up hanging a name on all of this, but not before we learned from Wired magazine a while ago that they still didn't know. Even last week didn't know who was running Dodgy and were denying the whole thing. And then in court yesterday, we told you about the DOJ lawyers pretending they didn't know or insisting that they really didn't. This one goes back a little ways, but I don't know. Maybe we've made the point already, but I parked this one just by way of background information. This is from February 18th, last week. We missed reading this one at the time, but I think we now know that this is part of the background. Not even Dodgy employees know who's legally running Dodgy, is the headline in this Wired piece. The subheader says, despite all appearances, the White House insists that Elon Musk is not in charge of Dodgy. Now, when we say the White House, we mean everybody but Donald Trump, because Donald Trump is out there publicly insisting that Elon Musk is in charge. U.S. Dodgy service employees can't get a straight answer about who is. So that's February 18th. Right? And so yesterday we're handed this other name, and I think they speculate in this piece about the names that might, in fact, end up being revealed as the administrator. If I recall correctly, there are a couple of names thrown around in here, including the one that they finally landed on. But this article also reminds us that they're playing weird embedded LLC games here, that there's a U.S. Dodgy Service and a U.S. Dodgy Service temporary organization as well, although the executive order that they keep referring to as the supposed authority for any of their actions is or basically lays out that the administrator of Dodgy is supposed to also be the administrator and the lead of the temporary organization as well. So it doesn't really matter, which one or who it is. They will be, if they're following the executive order, which they claim to be, that'll be the administrator of both. So, okay, before Trump was inaugurated, there's a little paragraph or two here where they get to the names. Before Trump was inaugurated, the USDS, remember that's the U.S. Digital Service, the former name, or the organization that used to exist and that was morphed into Dodgy because they were finally forced to admit it's not a department, it has to be something else. and you either have to create it through Congress or you can perhaps get away by executive order with renaming an existing agency within what? I don't know where, but they moved it into the White House. It was the U.S. Digital Service. So before Trump was inaugurated, the USDS administrator was one Mina Sang. We tried pronouncing that name the other day, remember? After she left, end of the Biden administration, beginning of the Trump administration, one Ted Carstensen was the highest-ranking legacy USDS leader, but then he resigned from the organization on February 6th. I was going to say 21st, but that's because I was immediately reminded of what Greg said, that another 21 legacy employees of the U.S. Digital Service very recently also resigned rather than lend their expertise to the dodgy mission. Now back to Wired here. After Ted resigned, we received no correspondence as far as who the head of this organization was, says a current USDS employee, who may have been among the 21 that resigned, who requested anonymity due to concerns of retaliation. Some people Wired spoke with at USDS view Amy Gleason, and that is in fact the name that was handed to us just yesterday, and everybody said, Amy Gleason, never heard of her. Well, you did hear of her if you read Wired's coverage back on February 18th, and I think one of the articles that we actually did read, not this one, but another from Wired, did in fact name drop Amy Gleason at some point. So some people Wired spoke to prior to February 18th view Amy Gleason, a former USDS official who served in the first Trump administration, as a liaison between legacy USDS, dodgy, and other agencies, but little is known about her official role. And by the way, in looking her up, people did find that she did in fact work in the previous Trump administration's version of the USDS. But if you look further back, she also worked in Barack Obama's version of USDS as well, in trying to help integrate systems in what I think eventually became, healthcare.gov and some of the online healthcare exchanges, et cetera, et cetera. But, certainly healthcare data has been her focus prior to today. There's another possibility out there. Little is known about her official role, but there was also Steve Davis, a longtime Musk associate and the president of The Boring Company. That's another name rumored to be formally leading dodgy. Davis has worked with Musk for years and led the billionaire's cost-cutting efforts when taking over Twitter, now X, in 2022. Davis went as far as sleeping in Twitter HQ with his wife, Nicole Hollander, and their child back in the days when he was taking over Twitter and trying to transform it. And that's now the model for how they're working dodgy, right down to sleeping in the offices. By the way, Nicole Hollander, his wife, who stayed with him in Twitter HQ, now a high-level General Services Administration official, allegedly. So, that's weird too. Steve Davis, let's see. Steve Davis has always been articulated as the leader of dodgy. Is that right? But when I ask if he's the administrator, managers say, we don't know. One former USDS employee tells Wired, when I asked if he's the interim administrator, they say, we don't know. They've said Brad Smith, a healthcare entrepreneur with ties to Davis, is serving in a chief of staff role. Meanwhile, as USDS staffers are trying to figure out who is running their agency, dozens of them have been laid off. Around 50 people out of USDS's approximately 200 employees were fired on Friday. Sources tell Wired that product managers, designers, and members of the talent team were hit the hardest, along with some engineers. No rhyme or reason. Literally in the middle of work, another source said of the Friday night firings, there are so many of us. And then another 21 quit. Right? I have heard that our directors at USDS, the legacy USDS, still have not received any kind of list of justification for the intention to terminate emails sent on Friday evening, says another source at the agency. Last week, and this would have been now 2 weeks ago, multiple agencies, of course, rocked by sudden layoffs. Consumer Financial Protection Bureau among them, GSA among them, but not that guy's wife, I guess, CDC, Education Department, VA, Transportation, Energy, all terminated thousands of workers. White House did not respond to multiple requests for comment. While Musk's dodgy workers have taken over USDS for the last month, very few legacy employees have interacted with their new colleagues whatsoever. So it was a takeover, maybe in name only. They just said we need a vehicle to pretend there's a dodgy organization and where it lives and have offices and employees. So we're just going to change the name, like we're going to create Space Force. We're just going to change the name of USDS to Dodgy. Earlier this month, Wired reported that Dodgy had built a firewall separating Musk's team from the rest of the organization's workforce. The only time legacy staff had a meeting with a representative from Dodgy was on February 1st with Stephanie Holmes, who identified herself as the team's new HR person. The only other experiences legacy USDS staff have had with Dodgy staff were their surprise one-on-one interviews with Dodgy-affiliated engineers who refused to identify themselves during the first week of the Trump administration. So there you go. That was the first mention of Amy Gleason that I'm aware of. And then a reminder that despite the fact that the White House claims that USDS was converted into Dodgy, people who worked at the legacy USDS have had no contact whatsoever with Dodgy and barely know that there's any relationship between the two, just rumors. But they don't know. They're not being told who's the head of the place. And even now, if we find out that it's Amy Gleason, I think they're landing on, well, she's the highest ranking USDS person left. And since we said USDS had been converted into Dodgy, she must be the administrator, except the people in USDS say, we were never really converted into anything. They just stole our identity, essentially, and said they were a government agency based on having stolen our ID. That's not a bad way of thinking about it. Identity theft is something we all can understand. Here's the New York Times reporting on it under the misleading headline, "A Mystery Solved. Amy Gleason, a former healthcare executive, is running Dodgy." Now, this is all I would have said. You need to say purportedly running Dodgy, and it's not a mystery solved because we still can't really point to this thing and say, how do we know this is true? And again, paperwork. You can trip them up every time on paperwork. And naming her as administrator is going to require some paperwork. And Trump loves nothing more than signing official-looking paperwork and showing it to crowds. It just, for some strange reason, he never signed and showed this one to anybody. And the strange reason is he never signed anything. And the reason that's important is in these courtroom proceedings, they're going to go back today and say the answer, Your Honor, is Amy Gleason. And for the purposes of what the court is asking here, they're going to basically want to say, show me the paperwork on this one, because the reason I'm asking who is the administrator is because I need to know from this administrator, did you in fact consult with the various government actors, the various administration actors that the executive order purportedly authorizes you to speak to in order to effectuate these changes? If you did not, or if you were not in fact the administrator of Doge when you claim you did, or when they claim you did, anyway, you haven't made any claims, then we have a problem. The actions of Dodgy are illegal, unauthorized by law or executive order or anything. So it is extremely important that you be able to document that this person was and knew that they were the administrator of Dodgy when they supposedly had these conversations, and that these conversations did in fact take place. Authenticate all of this. They're never going to be able to authenticate it because they did not do that paperwork. Why didn't they do that paperwork? Because they did not name her as the administrator of Dodgy before yesterday. She wasn't the person that they said authorized all of this stuff. They just said the administrator did. Well, who's the administrator? We don't know. Oh, now all of a sudden we know? I mean, you came up with a human person's name, sure, but did you do any of the work that would actually have made that official? No. If you didn't, then it wasn't official. You've lost the case. That's why all of this is important. Anyway, the New York Times, for whatever reason, gives them the benefit of the doubt and says the mystery's now been solved. Ms. Gleason is the acting administrator of the Department of Government Efficiency, according to a White House official. The news comes as a federal judge questioned who was leading the operation. And without, in the headline and the subheader, you're not going to be able to go into this, but I'll see whether the article gives us any hint about whether or not the mystery is really solved and whether it will be sufficient after we come back. Nicholas Nehamas, Kate Conger, and Ryan Mack have the headline, the byline on this piece, published just yesterday, and we'll see when we come back from the break whether or not it really answers the questions. I think not.
Hi everybody, it's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and patreon.com, patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's read the New York Times piece here and see if it solves any of the mystery as it says in the headline here. Amy Gleason, a former healthcare investment executive, that is one of the things she did in between stints at USDS, is serving as the acting administrator of the Department of Government Efficiency, which isn't a department, the Government Overhaul Task Force imposing dramatic changes across the federal bureaucracy under the direction of Elon Musk. A White House official said on Tuesday. Why bring up his name if he's not the administrator? Well, he's the one calling the shots. Is he allowed to call the shots? Well, we don't know. For 2 weeks, the Trump administration had resisted. 2 weeks. Wow. Oh, and 2 weeks comes up all the time with Trump, right? For 2 weeks, the Trump administration had resisted answering inquiries about who was formally leading the effort, which reports to the White House. Mr. Musk, who is the and how much reporting were they doing to the White House if no one knew who was doing the reporting, right? Mr. Musk, who is the world's richest man and a key advisor to President Trump, has been clearly driving the initiative, including by instigating an email to all federal employees on Saturday that instructed them to list their accomplishments during the last week. But the White House has insisted in court that Mr. Musk is not the administrator of the cost-cutting team, adding to the sense of opacity surrounding it, and of course causing other problems. On Monday, a federal judge pressed the government for clarity about the billionaire's role, expressing concern that unauthorized individuals were effectively running the office. On Tuesday, a name was revealed, and that's all. Ms. Gleason is the temporary leader of what is formally known as the U.S. Dodgy Service, according to the White House official who was not authorized to speak publicly because of how official their information was. Duh. Mr. Trump created the office on Inauguration Day through an executive order, transforming a White House tech unit that had been established under President Barack Obama. That's the U.S. Digital Service. Since then, staffers hired by Mr. Musk and his aides have fanned across the government and sought access to sensitive databases, scrutinized federal employees, and even tried to shutter whole agencies. Ms. Gleason did not immediately respond to a request for comment. She was scheduled to be on vacation in Mexico on Tuesday, and told associates that she was not aware ahead of time that the White House planned to make public her role, according to people familiar with the situation who spoke on the condition of anonymity out of fear of retaliation. Now, that is a gymnastic phrase that can cover either possibility. Either she had no idea that she was the administrator and had no plans to become the administrator, or that could mean, well, I know I am the administrator, but I didn't think that the White House was going to publicly acknowledge that I was the administrator. But I mean, why would somebody who's actually used to working in federal service think that they would be the administrator of the thing, but that it would be a secret? I think that's constructed that way to give rise to that possibility, but an experienced USDS employee would know that's not the way government works, right? That is not how this works! I know, Amy, but you don't have to be that mad about it. Although she's frustrated, I'm sure, at not getting the vacation she was due in Mexico. Now, you would think that this is kind of a peak time for busyness in the dodgy service, and that its chief administrator, would not be cleared for vacation in Mexico at the time. But I think all of that points to the other interpretation, which is that she was not aware ahead of time that the White House planned to claim that she was, in fact, the acting administrator. I think that all points in that direction. Ms. Gleason, a career official who worked at the Digital Service Unit during Mr. Trump's first term and earlier, rejoined the agency late last year. That's an interesting time to do it. So prior to inauguration, but post-election, she rejoined the agency late last year, according to people familiar with her role, and actual documents, reviewed by the New York Times, none of which I'm sure say that she's rejoining the unit in the capacity of administrator or acting administrator or anything close to it. During the first Trump administration, the digital agency, which stations tech workers throughout the federal government to assist with modernization efforts, had posted Ms. Gleason with HHS, where she worked on COVID response, according to documents seen by the Times. Ms. Gleason had focused on healthcare reforms, which she said during a TEDx presentation in 2020 was inspired by her frustrations with the medical system after her daughter was diagnosed with a rare illness. After Mr. Trump's first term, she joined Brad Smith, a healthcare executive who had worked with Mr. Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, on the COVID response. Maybe not such a great guy to be working with on anything, but COVID response in particular. But she joined Brad Smith, who had worked with Jared Kushner on COVID at an investment firm focused on health companies, taking the role of chief product officer. Late last year, Mr. Smith began advising Musk's cost-cutting efforts and eventually brought Gleason, who is based in Nashville, by the way, not coming to the office in Washington, D.C., into the discussions, according to people familiar with the situation. On December 30th, more than 3 weeks before Inauguration Day, Gleason was reintroduced at the Digital Service Office as a new hire on an internal Slack channel, according to documents viewed by the Times. My previous time at USDS was incredibly meaningful, full of challenges, successes, and unforgettable experiences, Gleason wrote as part of a new hire spotlight document seen by the Times. I'm excited to meet new colleagues and dive into impactful projects once again. In January, Gleason met regularly with Smith and Steve Davis, a top aide to Musk, at the Eisenhower Executive Office building, where Musk has set up his dodgy offices, a person familiar with her work said. In recent weeks, Gleason has overseen the transition of the Digital Service Agency into Musk's operation, through executive order, Trump moved it from the Office of Management and Budget, where it had been housed since its founding, into the White House. A transition that effectively shielded its work from open records laws that could give the public insight into its operations. The most transparent. Oh, my goodness. During an all-hands meeting with staffers last week, Gleason told employees that they should adopt a one-team mentality and work closely with their new counterparts, including dozens of young engineers and lawyers that Musk recruited to help him overhaul the federal bureaucracy. But as we read in Wired on the 18th, none of that has happened. One team has not met the other team at this point, so it's very much a two-team situation. But the takeover of the office has not gone smoothly. Not only did they not meet with one another, but it is noted here that on Tuesday, 21 employees at USDS announced their resignations, protesting the incursion of the federal government by Mr. Musk and his allies. We will not use our skills as technologists to compromise core government systems, jeopardize Americans' sensitive data, or dismantle critical public services, the group wrote in its letter. We will not lend our expertise to carry out or legitimize Dodgy's actions. Before Ms. Gleason's role was revealed, or invented, one might say, reporters had urged the White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt to name the agency's administrator on Tuesday at a daily briefing for the news media. I'm not going to reveal the name of that individual from this podium, Ms. Leavitt replied. I'm happy to follow up and provide that to you, but we've been incredibly transparent about the way that Dodgy is working. All right, then tell me who's working it. No. That does seem kind of weird, but what can I tell you? That's something. That's the way they decided to handle it. Now, I was somewhat interested in the article that New York Times linked to about the 21 resignations. See whether that tells us anything. 21 Dodgy staffer members quit, refusing to assist Musk's effort. The employees had worked for U.S. Digital Service, a technology-focused unit rebranded by Mr. Musk and empowered by President Trump, allegedly. Ryan Mack, who got part of the byline for the previous piece, wrote this one on his own. This one just from yesterday, noting that 21 had resigned and repeating their statement, but noting here that this was a letter was addressed to Susie Wiles, Trump's chief of staff. The resignations, reported earlier by the Associated Press, even though they're not allowed inside the building anymore, come as Mr. Musk and his allies have begun to radically reshape the size and scope of the federal government, engaging in layoffs, ending contracts, shuttering entire agencies. All that is true. Is there anything else of importance in all this? Not really. I was just sort of looking to see whether they started naming any names or whether any of the people who had previously been floated as possibly being the acting administrator before Gleason and her name came up were among the ones resigning, but no such information in this article. All right. Gotta shift gears and work a couple more things into the rotation. I mentioned to you that there was another reference to 2 weeks. We'll just sort of jump around a little bit here. I thought this one interesting. Aaron Rupar doing his usual thing here and exporting little snippets of video from one of his press availabilities inside the Oval Office, announcing an ostensibly new program, although it really is essentially an extension of a previous program, but with a different price tag now hung on it. There are categories of visas and green cards in the United States that essentially say that if you're bringing enough investment in the United States with you, paying money, spending money in the United States, you can get a special kind of visa. And I think it was EB something. There's a number attached to it somewhere along the line. I don't know what it is offhand. But it's something that we recognize from the first Trump administration. I don't know whether it was their invention, but Jared Kushner was dealing in it and essentially offering it to wealthy Chinese folks who wanted, who were willing to come up with $1 million, I think it was, of investment in the United States in exchange for this special kind of visa. Trump is now upping the ante and saying that I guess the number is to go to $5 million, which, by itself is not a bad idea. If we're going to have them, they might as well be forcing people to invest more money in them. But now he describes it as, well, the quote from the video here is, "We're going to be selling a gold card." You love it? Green cards we know about, but this one's going to be gold, like the credit cards, plus it's gold, Trump. You have a green card. This is a gold card. We're going to put a price on that card of about $5 million, and that's going to give you a green card privileges plus. What's the plus? We don't know. Well, we're getting an idea of it. It's going to be a route to citizenship, and wealthy people will be coming into our country. Now, the funny part about this, and not quoted here in the text, but if you listen to the audio, and I mean, it's a minute, you could spend audio on it, but the fun part is at the end. How long before they're ready to announce this new thing? Because he does go on a little bit about, we were going to announce this. We were going to have Caroline Leavitt do it. We were going to announce this later. We weren't quite ready with it, but I figured you were here. Let me give you something. Because he loves to make announcements, and sometimes he just makes things up on the spot. But the fun part was, when were we going to announce this? When are we going to be ready with this one? About 2 weeks. 2 weeks. I mean, I screamed with laughter listening to him say that he was going to do this in 2 weeks. I don't know. Maybe I ought to just, can I open this thing and pocket it and then switch computers and then I can play. I think it's only about a minute of audio. And I know it's a little bit of a waste of time to do it, but it's always fun to hear him say something's going to take 2 weeks. Plus, of course, to hear it in his voice explaining and just vaguely noting that, you're going to get some extra special treatment for extra money. And by the way, I don't know whether it was in this video or additional video that Rupar then distributed afterwards. He's asked point blank, like, what sort of extra privileges? Like, one of them is, you're going to be able to, this is incredible, you're going to be able to give money to political candidates as a non-citizen, as much as you want, because you've paid the price, the $5 million. That way, I guess, in his mind, you're trustworthy. And people asked, well, will Russian oligarchs be able to come here and pay $5 million and then be able to give unlimited funds to political candidates, whether they're citizens or not? And he says, yeah, some Russian oligarchs are nice guys. I mean, this is incredible. It really just zero concern about what it means and what it looks like to do this. This is a guy who just doesn't think he's going to get got. Anyway, let's see if I can grab this video and play this. I'll have to fiddle with the volume, I'm sure. Here we go. Okay. Are we ready to roll this?
Anything else, it's going to be very, very good. We're going to be selling a gold card. You have a green card. This is a gold card. We're going to be putting a price on that card of about $5 million, and that's going to give you green card privileges plus. It's going to be a route to citizenship, and wealthy people will be coming into our country by buying this card. They'll be wealthy, and they'll be successful, and they'll be spending a lot of money and paying a lot of taxes and employing a lot of people.
By the way, yeah, it's no real word on whether they're going to be paying any taxes or anything like that. And of course, all the stupid, Reaganomics assumptions that these are wealthy people. First of all, that this isn't the end of their wealth, and maybe it's not. But secondly, well, they're going to be creating a lot of jobs and buying a lot of goods. And what jobs are they going to be creating that aren't? I mean, is mobster a job? Honestly. But, all the stupid assumptions. They're wealthy and so successful, very successful. What's the success? They successfully gave me $5 million, I guess. I don't know that the money goes into the treasury. He doesn't say it does. There's a little bit
we
more.
Think it's going to be extremely successful. Never been done before or anything like this, but it's something that we're going to be putting out over the next, would you say 2 weeks, Howard? Do you want to say a couple of words about it?
He doesn't want to say any words about it, or at least none that are in the video. They cut the video off right then and there. So I don't know who Howard is and whether or not he has anything to say. But 2 weeks is a telltale sign, for one thing. Very smarmy to say the very least. And nothing like this has ever been done before. Of course it has been. It's just that the privileges didn't include making illegal campaign contributions. But let's see if we can throw that one in there as well. It looks like they're pressing Caroline Leavitt right now about this supposed dodgy appointment. Let's see. Reporter asking, when exactly did Amy Gleason start her job as dodgy administrator? And her answer is, Amy Gleason has been the dodgy administrator for quite some time. I believe several weeks, maybe a month. I'm not actually sure of the specific timeline. 2 weeks, or for some other very short period of time. Anyway, I'm sure that that's either not the case, or at least can't be established by paperwork, because they can never establish anything by paperwork. Anyway, I wanted to get the 2 weeks thing in off of that video. And now I got a million other things, all of them extremely important. How many of them can I fit in? Here's one that's the big alarm bell one for the day. And we're going to be coming back to this one. Politico had the news. I'm sorry that I have to rely on them for this one, but ready for this? Trump targets Washington law firm that aided Jack Smith. We've been wondering about what form his revenge on Jack Smith would take. And I guess this is his first opportunity. But this is super un-American and super authoritarian and kind of has to be checked at some level. And I guess these are the people to try to do it through the court system. Hopefully they don't knuckle under like the journalists, the journalist organizations, the news organizations that said, this guy has no business filing these suits, much less winning these suits, but we're going to settle anyway and send him millions of dollars. I guess if these guys knuckle under, this is just, I guess, the end of it all. What's happening? Trump targets Washington law firm that aided Jack Smith. The president suspended security clearances of lawyers at the firm of Covington and Burling, big time firm, over their pro bono work for the special counsel, Jack Smith. That's the subheader. Josh Gerstein and Kyle Cheney have the news. As always, I guess, over at Politico. President Donald Trump retaliated Tuesday against a Washington law firm that provided free legal services to special counsel Jack Smith, the federal prosecutor who brought 2 criminal cases against Trump that were dropped after he won last November's election. During an Oval Office photo opportunity devoted to a series of executive actions, the things he signs and holds up, there's a picture of him doing that. That's how you know he didn't appoint Amy Gleason as acting administrator of Dodgy. He would have signed this thing and held it up. During an Oval Office photo op, of course, Trump signed a memorandum suspending the security clearances of lawyers and other personnel at Covington and Burling involved in representing Smith before he resigned from the Justice Department last month. Of course, these guys, one, earned their security clearances with a background check, just like any other, although who knows, they may also have held security clearances that he once granted them for no good reason if they're Republicans who happen to have been hired at Covington and Burling. But you need the security clearance, of course, in order to be able to review the materials involved in national security cases. And if you're going to defend Jack Smith or anybody else on national security prosecutions, you're going to need to have a security clearance so that you can review the evidence against your client or in favor of your client's case, whatever the case may be. But they can't withhold critical evidence from you on that grounds, unless, of course, the President of the United States, who's ostensibly in charge of handing out and rescinding these security clearances, even for no good reason, just takes your ability to be a lawyer for someone like Jack Smith away from you. And, of course, I guess jeopardizes your ability to do any number of other kinds of cases that usually come your way. Digging into your pocket and stealing money from you. Trump's directive also calls for ending all contracts that Covington has with the federal government, although a federal spending database doesn't show any government contracts with the firm, so he might not have as much leverage as he thinks there. The president's move followed a report in Politico earlier this month that Smith declared in a financial disclosure that he had received a gift of $140,000 worth of legal services from the firm while in government service. Government rules allow federal employees to take pro bono legal services related to their work as long as they get approval from their agency and disclose the gift. Trump's directive mentioned by name only one Covington lawyer representing Smith, Peter Koski, but it says it applies equally to others at the firms, quote, who assisted former special counsel Jack Smith during his time as special counsel, pending a review and determination of their roles and responsibilities, if any, in the weaponization of the judicial process. Trump frequently targeted Smith and his team during the special counsel's investigations and threatened to fire him. In a statement, Covington said the firm, quote, recently agreed, unquote, to represent Smith when it, quote, became apparent that he would become the subject of a government investigation, unquote, and suggested the relationship began around the time of the 2024 election. For more than 100 years, Covington has represented clients facing government investigations consistent with the best traditions of the legal profession, the firm's statement said. Covington serves as defense counsel to Jack Smith in his personal, individual capacity. We look forward to defending Mr. Smith's interests and appreciate the trust he has placed in us to do so. A Covington spokesperson declined to comment on whether Koski or other lawyers there currently have security clearances. The directive Trump signed Tuesday is just his latest attempt to use his return to the power of the presidency to punish his perceived enemies. He has rescinded security clearances for former intelligence community officials who signed a letter raising concerns, it says here, that ultimately turned out to be false, that Hunter Biden's hard drive bore the hallmarks of a foreign influence operation. I don't know whether they're saying that it's their view that Hunter Biden's hard drive did not bear the hallmarks of a foreign influence operation, or whether it turned out to be false that it was Hunter Biden's hard drive at all, which I think is Marcy Wheeler's view of things. But that may be a huge giveaway in the factual statements here. Trump also pulled the clearance for attorney Mark Zaid, a prominent whistleblower attorney who represented the intelligence official who helped trigger Trump's 2020 impeachment. That's the second one. Trump also has pulled security details for figures who have criticized and publicly opposed him. Attorney General Pam Bondi has also launched a weaponizing working group, as she calls it, that is assigned to examine the conduct of Smith's team, among other things. Trump, during the Oval appearance on Tuesday, mocked Smith and tossed the pen that he used to sign the memo to someone in the room with instructions to deliver it to the former special counsel. And then he says, we're going to call it the deranged Jack Smith signing, or bill. You know, he wanted to say it's Jack Smith bill, but he knows it's not a bill, I guess, in the back of his mind. So we're going to call it that, huh? To who? We're calling it, we're going to call it later when we call it something, the deranged Jack Smith signing, or bill. Said I could call it either one. Trump told reporters, the weaponization of our system by law firms, even pro bono work they're doing in order to clog up government, stop government, and nobody knows about it better than me, and hopefully that'll never happen again. Now, a reporter began to ask Trump about the wisdom of the directive. Trump interrupts him. Excuse me. I've been targeted for 4 years, longer than that, the president said. You don't tell me about targeting. I was the target of corrupt politicians for 4 years, and then 4 years after that. So don't tell me about targeting. Why not? You don't understand it. Covington counts several prominent Democrats in its ranks, including former Attorney General Eric Holder, now a senior counsel at the firm, and former DOJ Criminal Division Chief and Clinton White House lawyer Lanny Breuer, who's a partner there. The firm also served as counsel to President Joe Biden's 2020 presidential bid. So you would think they'll end up, hopefully they're the kind of people who will say, well, we can't just let this slide or settle or just sit there and take it or simply resign our work as pro bono counsel to Jack Smith and leave him twisting in the wind. But we'll see whether they stand up to it. But the idea that the president can use the power of the presidency to punish attorneys for representing someone facing criminal investigation seems a little autocratic and anti-American and needs to be on your watch list. All right, we're just about at the end of the line for today, but let me read you a little bit, I guess, on the way out the door on this one. And I guess we'll come back to trying to figure out what happened procedurally with the budget. Oh gosh, am I not going to be able to read this thing? From Government Executive, to which I admittedly do not subscribe. But I'll give you the headline here before we escape for the day, and let me set up and get ready for the music. Board agrees to pause firings for some feds, potentially upending Trump's widespread terminations. What's going on? The U.S. Merit Systems Protection Board, which had the allegedly fired member reinstated by the court earlier, has now used its authority to meet and declare that some of the firings going on in other departments need to stop because they too are unauthorized and being done improperly. So at least we're getting some decisions that purport to be setting things back and right. But I also, let's see, somewhere in here, I guess I should be looking for this. Did I not open this up and get set with it? I might have to go back and look in Pocket, but I had put aside the information on the NIH pauses. There we are, I think from the Guardian. All right, we'll do it this way. Just another line or two as we get ready to exit. The Guardian reporting Trump halts medical research funding in apparent violation of judge's order. I told you that was out there. The Health Department orders NIH to hold Federal Register submissions, a critical step in the process of funding studies. This is a very interesting technique that they came up with. Probably deserves more time in discussion later, so I won't archive this article just yet. But while being ordered by the federal courts to resume the programming and the programs that fund or that give grant funds to research for NIH-related work, they found a new way to turn it off. Apparently, in order to host some of these conferences that are necessary to push these grant programs forward, you have to publish the date that you're convening these things in the Federal Register. So they didn't tell them you can't have the conference, but they did tell them you're not permitted to publish in the Federal Register the date on which you're going to have it, which I guess is technicality enough to get in the way of actually holding the conference. It's very complicated.
You have been listening to Kagro in the morning with David Waldman.
But it does in the end represent an effort by the Trump administration to take and ignore, essentially, and undo a judicial decision ordering them to do the exact opposite of what they've just done. And we told you that was happening. We'll be back tomorrow and Friday to explain this situation and more. Now time to hand things over to Justice. Stay tuned.